If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard in Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
All right, everybody, and welcome to the Pro Wrestle Zone. Coming back at you with another 2002 pay-per review. As always, Dan the Beast 94 alongside with me is my colleague, the DVD Freak. And today, we're going to be going over Vengeance 2002, which took place in the Joe Louis Arena. Let me pull up the date. In Detroit, Michigan, July 21st of 2000. That is a beautiful, rare DVD.
I love it.
Something I liked about this, just a recap of the show. Going into the show, obviously, this is a show that took place in the year where the WWF went through the name change. They also realized that the roster was getting too big after the acquisition of WCW 1 year earlier. So this was the first brand split that took place. The original people who were in charge were Ric Flair and Vince McMahon. Obviously, that's changed up later on as we would have a babyface SmackDown manager and Stephanie McMahon, and the heel Raw manager and Eric Bischoff. Something that I did find very weird. Obviously, the promotional poster for Vengeance, it had Steve Austin on the poster. Obviously, Austin had walked out a month prior due to differences with the creative team, and this was the original poster that WWE was going with. Obviously, if you look on like the WWE Network now or the DVD cover, it's obviously different. You have The Rock, Undertaker, and Kurt Angle, who main evented this pay-per-view. Doing a little bit of information about this pay-per-view, Vengeance 2002 did 375,000 buys on pay-per-view, which was pretty good number at that time. Another thing about this pay-per-view, obviously, is it was released on home media. This was one of the rare pay-per-views released on DVD, along with Judgment Day 2002, only because of manufactured reasons. So, unfortunately, they weren't able to distribute them in stores. They were online exclusives. So if you were able to purchase these back in the day, hey, kudos to you. Nowadays, these DVDs go for about $200. American version wise, I mean, you could buy the Canadian version for about $70, $80, which still isn't too bad. But it's nice to be a little bit nostalgic when it comes to U.S. releases. So getting into this pay-per-view, I love the opening video package. It basically just focused around like Undertaker, Rock, Kurt Angle meeting in the main event with some Pulp Fiction quotes, which I really liked. One of my favorite movies, of course. And something that I also liked, kind of different. I mean, obviously, moving forward, they would go with like two separate announce teams. The first half of the show was aired by Taz and Michael Cole. As soon as we got to the second half, they introduced JR and King. Making it seem like, hey, SmackDown and Raw are legit competition. Like they want nothing to do with each other. So.
Yeah, I prefer just having two announce tables. honestly.
Yeah. Like, it's been so long since I've seen this pay-per-view. It was just like, JR and King's commentary table is usually set up right at the entrance ramp while, Cole and Taz are sitting by ringside. So for that to be called like, all right, we're going to have JR and King, start off the second half of the show, it was like, oh, you're really going to have SmackDown introduce the Raw commentary team? Like, no, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, going into this first match here, we had a tables elimination match between the Dudley Boys, Bubba Ray and Spike Dudley, taking on Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit. Now, these four guys were on the Raw brand. The Dudleys were faces, while Eddie and Benoit were heels. This was about 2 weeks before Eddie and Benoit were moved to SmackDown as part of this big trade, as Triple H later on within this pay-per-view would have to choose where he was going to be acquired, whether he wanted to go to Raw, whether he would want to go to SmackDown. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. And this was also around the time that Benoit just came back after being out of the company for 1 year after suffering a major neck surgery. And this was Benoit's first pay-per-view since June of 2001. So a little bit over a year. One thing that really made me chuckle about this match was there was the spot with Eddie Guerrero and Spike Dudley. Spike Dudley tries to go for the Dudley dog, and instead of it looking like he put Eddie through the table, it made it look like Eddie tried to counter it with like some type of backdrop, and they were like, "Oh, Eddie's eliminated." It didn't really look like that. I'm not sure about you.
Yeah, it looks like a reversal, but I think Spike went through the table before he did, so it's just like I obviously Spike's the one that had the offense. He's the one that hit the move, but it looked like a reversal to me. They should have just ran with it.
Yeah. And something that I noticed about this match, too, I'm not sure about you, but this was very stiff. A lot of stiff shots.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if it was because you had guys like Guerrero and Benoit in the ring at the same time, but, some of the shots that they were hitting in that ring, it was like, ooh, like, all right. Little bit cringy at first, but it was like, this was 2002. This was like the heights of moving forward from the WWF years and transitioning into the Ruthless Aggression era. So,
yeah, I really like the stiffness of the match. That's to me you're selling a fight, so it looks like it's more of a fight when you're actually hitting each other.
Right. But overall, this was pretty good as an opener. With the faces getting the win. Just to please the fans. I don't think the crowd wasn't really too into it. I would say that the faces got the advantage because obviously you're dealing with two guys who are masters of tables matches, of Ray at least. I'm not really sure about Spike. I mean, I think Spike gets put through more tables than him putting actual people through tables.
Yeah.
But you know what? The Dudleys winning made more sense since this was their match specialty. Plus, after this, Guerrero and Benoit, as I noted earlier, would move on to SmackDown as part of this big acquisition trade of just exchanging talent. Moving on to the next match here, we have the Cruiserweight Championship match with Jamie Noble, accompanied by Nydia, taking on Billy Kidman. It was fine for the time given, and I got pretty good, but I got pretty good at the end. But it was a short match. Let's just put it like that. I mean, I liked a lot of the moves that Kidman did leading towards the finish. Obviously, like one of my favorite moves is somebody hoisting them up for a power bomb. He reverses it into a face buster. It's like that move always gets me. It finesses me so much. It's like, oh, he's about to get power bomb. Nope, just kidding. But Noble, Noble's a unique heel. And I like the way that he capitalized at the end of this. He's definitely not like one of my favorite guys, but I thought these two back in the day were always capable of putting on some good matches, despite Jamie Noble not being the more technical, high flying wrestler as Kidman is. But this match didn't really excite me that much.
I enjoyed it for what it was. It did what it had to do. It's kind of just your average cruiserweight match, but I enjoyed it. There were some points where I thought there were too many false finishes here. There were a few spots where I'm like, yeah, that probably should have been it. Like it felt like the climax of the match and everything, but it was like 8.5 minutes, something like that.
That, man.
Yeah. I mean, for the time it was given, I thought it was good.
Getting into a backstage segment here, we have Kurt Angle interviewed by Mark Lloyd. I mean, I'm sure that's a name that a lot of people don't seem to remember quite too frequently because he wasn't really there that long for the SmackDown, broadcasting team. And Angle was showing a little bit of confidence that he would win the WWE Championship, but then, Paul Heyman shows up with Brock Lesnar and, reminding you guys, this is a little bit of foreshadowing as we would see Brock Lesnar taking on Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 19 just a couple months later. So this was the introduction. As prior to this, Brock Lesnar won the King of the Ring, becomes 2002 King of the Ring winner, and he advances on to SummerSlam to face the WWE champion. Oh, boy. And then going into our next match, we have the European Championship match between Jeff Hardy and William Regal. A little bit of pre-notes here. This was actually the last time the European Championship was defended on pay-per-view.
Oh, what a way to go out.
Not necessarily the best match, but I don't know. I mean, I wish the European Championship would have, stuck around a little bit longer, but obviously WWE was going through some changes. And, another thing that really bothered me was what was the point of getting rid of the European? And, I understand the Hardcore Championship because obviously this ain't the Attitude Era no more. So obviously you have to be a slight more careful of what you do on TV. But, months to follow, you would unify the Intercontinental Championship, and Raw wouldn't have a mid-card title until reviving the Intercontinental Championship at Judgment Day 2003.
You mean the United States Championship?
Well, no. Remember this. No Mercy 2002. You had Triple H, who was World Heavyweight Champion, taking on Kane, who was Intercontinental Champion. Triple H ended up winning both titles. So he ended up unifying both titles, and the Intercontinental Championship was on hiatus until it was reinstated at Judgment Day.
Okay.
So didn't really make a lot of sense to me to do that. But getting into this match here, Hardy wins with the roll-up. And, it was an okay for a shorter match. I'm not sure why it was as short as it was, but they were able to tell a decent story for the time given. The finish was done in a sudden way to show that Jeff found a way to get the job done and retain the title. And this was right around the time, they were starting to really peak Jeff Hardy, give little snippets, foreshadowing of Jeff Hardy possibly becoming this big main event star. Earlier within this month of July, it was actually July 1st of 2002, he had a undisputed championship opportunity when he took on The Undertaker on Monday Night Raw in a ladder match, which pretty much kind of solidified, his state as a performer. Now, obviously, Jeff Hardy would be released a couple months later due to, drug-related purposes, him refusing to go to rehab and him being forced to be released April of 2003. But, obviously as the years went on, he made his comeback. And, within the past or the next 2 years after that, WWE finally gave him that opportunity, with the window wide open, like, hey, you want this WWE championship now? Here you go. Basically Jeff on his best behavior.
Yeah, he was supposed to, what a lot of people don't know, he was supposed to win the WrestleMania 24 Money in the Bank ladder match and then cash in the same night on Orton. That's why they had Hardy and Orton at the Rumble. There's kind of a little foreshadowing there. So, yeah, I mean, we're nowhere near the peak of his career at this point in 2002. This is his rock bottom, basically. Yeah. He's had a couple rock bottoms. But, yeah, it's one of those things that's just kind of awkward to watch now because you know how close he is to getting released. And it's unfortunate because I love this version of Jeff Hardy. And I would pay a lot of money to see like a 25-minute match between William Regal and Jeff Hardy. I really would.
And you know what? I think that's the thing about Jeff Hardy and his point in his career. This was the most exciting version of Jeff Hardy, in my opinion. I think 2002 was his most elevating year as a superstar compared to him coming back in 2006, and being, let go again in 2009, which originally he was supposed to take some time off and then come back.
Yep.
But then, unfortunately, he was just like, nah, I'm going to go back to TNA. But, some of the But you know what? Some of the matches that Jeff Hardy had in 2002 were, definitely death-defying, and he definitely took a new approach with his character. Started dyeing his hair a little bit more. He started doing the glow-in-the-dark body and face paint, and starting to look like a real committed Home Depot worker. I don't know about you, but that paint aisle is looking pretty messy right now. But this was also around the time that WWE was like, hey, we're going to try this again with splitting you and Matt up and see how you do as a singles competitor, as, Matt was going to be the heel and Jeff Hardy was going to be the babyface. But now, with the brand split in full effect, they finally took that opportunity and were like, okay, we're going to put you on 2 different shows. That way it evens it out. Let's see which Hardy does better on what show. And, the rest is history. Obviously, we would know who would do better within the course of 2003. But that's a different discussion for another time. But going on now, we have, I would probably say this is probably historic in its time. We have the debut pay-per-view match of John Cena taking on Chris Jericho. Now, another little bit of foreshadowing here, but, John Cena would be the one that cost Chris Jericho his job in 2005, just 3 years later. But, Jericho was the heel while, Cena was the rookie babyface in this match. And, Cena was showing his demonstrations of ruthless aggression after debuting on SmackDown against Kurt Angle, which was a pretty good debut match. And this was right before Jericho moved to Raw, because if you remember, Jericho was part of the SmackDown brand for a couple months before they just started swapping guys left and right. And earlier within the week, Jericho got intentionally disqualified and beat up by Cena with chairs. And like I said, this was Cena's pay-per-view debut. Not bad. I will say so myself, but obviously this guy would go on to be the face of the company for the next 15 years, maybe even 20 years. But, obviously this was an early stage of Cena where he was just bland. Obviously, he would come out week after week with the different color schemes of tights, depending on what city they were in. Oh, we're in Los Angeles, California. I'm going to wear gold and purple. Or, we're in Boston. We're going to wear green and white. This show, he was wearing red and white, representing the Detroit Red Wings for the NHL. This was a big win for Cena in his pay-per-view debut. Obviously, Cena would win against Jericho, but the only thing that it lacked was crowd reaction because the crowd was dead. The crowd was just okay. And if you guys saw the Ruthless Aggression documentary on the network, or you could buy it on DVD at Walmart, obviously Cena was going through that phase where he was lacking character. He was expected to be released by Christmas until that day on the tour bus where he starts rapping in front of everybody. And Stephanie McMahon was like, you're coming up with that off the top of your head. And he's just like, yeah. And that's where the rap gimmick pretty much came in full effect a couple months after this. And we would slowly see John Cena descending to the top of the, I guess you would say, mid-carders, because he wasn't necessarily a main eventer just yet.
Yeah, it's so strange to see in 2002 Cena and Chris Jericho, because they would feud 6 years later, and a very high-profile feud. So it's just interesting how the tables turned here. But it's about your basic John Cena rookie match. It is faster paced than you would assume, so I did like that. He won with a roll up, which that was kind of what he was. That was his finisher at that time. He had a little roll up he would do.
Well, you got to put it this way: it's a rookie finish.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you're a rookie, when you want to score a big pinfall over, a veteran name, you're going to win with a roll-up. And something that I did like about this, too, was John Cena's arsenal, because some of the moves that he was doing, he wouldn't be doing later on in the future. He was doing, belly-to-bellies and spine busters. When's the last time you seen John Cena do a spine buster?
No clue.
Maybe
the Nikki Bella.
Yeah, I mean, oh boy. Well, that's why they're not together anymore. So he ran out of moves. But anyway, oh boy. Obviously, the show would the announce team would get switched up. As the first half, it was announced by Michael Cole and Taz. Until the Raw announce team of Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler made their entrance to take over the commentary for the rest of the show. This was about an hour into the show with nearly 2 hours left. So it wasn't half of the show. Just, brief segments with the SmackDown guys. So,
yeah.
And, obviously this is something that you have to look to as, a Vince thing, because Vince wanted more attention for his flagship show rather than the B show, even though the B show was slightly better than the mainstream show. But we get on to the next match, and I believe this was the only time Brock Lesnar challenged for the Intercontinental Championship. Because we have an Intercontinental Championship match between Rob Van Dam versus Brock Lesnar. And I'm not sure about you. I mean, there's a lot of guys who can put up with Brock Lesnar inside the ring. I consider Rob Van Dam one of them, because I think some of the moves that he was taking, not even in this match, but prior to this matchup, so King of the Ring, and just prior to that, him being attacked on the Raw set, it just proves, Rob Van Dam's toughness when it comes to competing with bigger competitors, especially when you're in a position for a Styles clash. you're not going up against somebody who's, matching your style, your height, compared to guys like Jerry Lynn, for example, who, those guys put on phenomenal matches back in the day. But for him to go up against Lesnar, he was definitely a worthy contender. One thing I didn't like about this match was the DQ finish. I mean, obviously, Lesnar would go on to win by DQ, but no, not DQ, but Heyman pulled the referee out, which caused the DQ. But
and then he started pounding Paul Heyman.
Yeah, but I mean, this was a pretty good even with the DQ. They were in a tough spot because Lesnar should have won the match in dominant fashion, rather than just lose to the DQ finish. And I think it would have been an interesting run with Lesnar winning the Intercontinental Championship. Like, why not go into SummerSlam and have a title versus title match and have Brock, walk out with both titles?
Yeah, but that would kind of just defeat the purpose of that big crowning moment. Because that was his first title. So, yeah.
And plus, this was more of a redemption type match between Robbie and Dam and Brock Lesnar. So, the way I see it, what was the point of putting the Intercontinental Championship on the line? I mean, they should have made this a non-title match, or they should have just had the IC title on somebody else at this point. Maybe even like Jeff Hardy had like a unification match at Vengeance, since you're going to unify the European Championship within like a week or two. Anyway, I mean, I did like the story of the match with Lesnar using his power, and Van Dam showed a lot. His eye of the tiger, his heart as the babyface coming back, trying to redeem himself. Like I said, the finish was disappointing because it was a DQ ending, but that's because they didn't want to do with the title change, and they wanted to avoid Lesnar being pinned, showing Brock Lesnar's dominance. Because let's just face it, 2002 Brock Lesnar was a lot better than Brock Lesnar in maybe like 2014, 2015, onward and so forth.
Yeah. Well, I've said there's nothing better than a motivated Brock Lesnar. It just doesn't happen very often. So, this match, I really enjoyed it. It was a good back and forth. It's about, it's nothing above it's not above like a 2.5 star match or anything, but it's still really good. I kind of knew there'd be a nothing finish because you can't bury your champion and you can't bury your number one contender who just won King of the Ring. So you kind of gotta, weasel your way out of that. They could have just made it a non-title match and then have Brock win. So it's just like, because I don't think he should have won the IC title here at all. That would defeat the purpose of the whole SummerSlam story.
Right. Now, you know what? Getting into this, I got a little bit of a analysis here. Lesnar getting the WWE title shot at SummerSlam. So, it was important to make him look strong, and that's what they did. And I think Lesnar beating, I mean, I think, you know what? I'm not even sure. I think just like Lesnar being in the match, beating Robbie and Dam would have been a better thing for Brock, beating him clean. I mean, this was still ineffective in terms of making Lesnar look dominant. And I just think if they booked this where Lesnar won a match and was still undefeated, it would have been a lot better for Brock. But, I mean, in the end, it didn't matter too much since Lesnar was left with the WWE Championship within a month at SummerSlam. So, but, I mean, that's just me. Now, going into the next match, weird. very, very weird. You have two former NWO guys who literally got kicked out of the NWO, and this is bypassed the NWO storyline by this point. We have a no disqualification, no count out match between the Big Show and Booker T.
This was torture.
This was, I don't know, like, why? I mean, why have these guys commencing a feud? Like, this feud didn't really do any purpose, and the match was only 5 minutes and 50 seconds. So
It's like, why have a no DQ match for a match that's like there's barely any heat, and you're only going to give them like 5 minutes? So what's the point? Why even bother with that?
it was okay as a match to put Booker T over as a babyface that, kept on fighting back against a bigger heel. I mean, Booker showed a lot of heart in putting up a fight here, but I think I really liked the scissors kick through the Spanish announce table, which obviously the Spanish announce table is like the number one spot when it comes to pay-per-views in general. But the leg drop off the top by Booker was very impressive as well. Obviously known as the Houston Hangover, Harlem Hangover, Houston Hangover, one of those.
Yeah.
But what's the you know what? It was okay for what it was, but I think Booker looked pretty impressive in this match, against the bigger adversary. So now to the main course. What I would consider the main course is Triple H choosing what brand he will join. Now, to recap on this, I believe it was like a week or two prior, Shawn Michaels gave Triple H 2 weeks at Vengeance to decide whether he wanted to join the NWO or not. Obviously, all of that was scrapped, as that was the same night Kevin Nash was cleared to compete after going through a minor injury. Oh, Kevin Nash is in ring gear. All right, Kevin Nash is about to compete in his first match in 3 months probably? And it is a 5-man tag. It was the NWO, consisting of members Kevin Nash, X-Pac, and The Big Show, along with Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, taking on Spike Dudley, Bubba Ray Dudley, Booker T, Goldust, and Rob Van Dam. During the match, Kevin Nash gets tagged in. What happens? Tears his quad for like the 600th time. And obviously, that didn't lead to anything, as the next week, NWO music played. The NWO didn't come out, but it was Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon comes out. He's like, the NWO is no more. And as soon as the NWO ended, Eric Bischoff is introduced as the new Raw general manager. And this came down to a point where Triple H had to choose which brand he was going to compete for. Whether it was going to be with his future wife, Stephanie McMahon, on SmackDown, or it was going to be with somebody he wasn't too familiar with from the competition standpoint when Raw and Nitro were going head-to-head back in the mid to late 90s. So, obviously, this came about as Shawn Michaels made his way to the ring, and basically Shawn Michaels convinced Triple H, hey, we could cause a lot of hell just like the old days on Raw. We got to stick to the flagship company. We got to make Raw what it was for when we were dominating the ratings back in the late 90s. So Triple H was basically like, bye-bye, Steph. Shawn and Triple H hug it out. He doesn't necessarily say that he chose Raw, but obviously it was like, Eric Bischoff got the victory. And something that I liked during the promo, Eric Bischoff trying to be a little bit of a ha-ha here. He was like, well, Miss McMahon, I win and you lose. And the biggest difference between me and you is I have testicles and you don't. Well, no fucking shit, And then Stephanie McMahon hits him with the infamous bitch slap, which knocks Bischoff off his feet. And the next day, we would see Shawn Michaels and Triple H with a short, brief DX reunion, which would obviously lead up to the returning Shawn Michaels match at SummerSlam against Triple H. So, Freak, what did you think about this whole segment? Like, what was the point of this segment with Triple H choosing between Raw and SmackDown when it could have been one of those situations where they could have just did a trade?
Yeah, this was just very cheesy, and it dragged on. I was so bored. Like, obviously, we know where he's going. I mean, you'd be an idiot to not think he was going to Raw at this point. But I don't know. It's just, I feel like they could have just gave more time to the 3 previous matches instead of have this like 23-minute segment. Like, this could have been done on Raw easily. This segment, this is an opening Raw segment. That's what this is. Right. So it just doesn't fit with the tone of the pay-per-view. So it felt really out of place.
Yeah. And, the thing about Bischoff, too, he was like, oh, Hollywood's talking about Rock. And, the Hollywood agents are looking for their next big star. And they're looking at Hunter. Oh, we even got sneaker deals, too. Like, who gives a fuck about sneaker deals? Like, I mean.
Fuck the sneakers.
I mean, hey, I mean, I'm a sneakerhead. So, I mean. But, I mean, at the end, I mean, this was definitely a long promo segment on a pay-per-view, which I never really prefer. But here's my question. Here's my biggest question. How do you think this segment would have went if this was the NWO storyline still in effect?
I think I prefer how it went down here. At NWO shit. God. It just would have been shit. I think possibly the NWO storyline would have kept going if Shawn wasn't cleared for an in-ring return. I feel like they just kind of rushed it so they could set up Triple H and Shawn for your second biggest pay-per-view of the year.
Right.
So I think the bigger question is, how would this have gone if Shawn Michaels wasn't returning to the ring? What if he never came back?
That's a question that definitely gets everybody's gears turning, because I mean, obviously we knew where this was going. I mean, if Shawn was going to be cleared to compete at SummerSlam, there must have been some effect between, Triple H and the NWO, because, originally, if Scott Hall wasn't to have been released in May, instead of this being like an NWO angle, I think this would have been more of a Click angle. I think they would have dropped the whole NWO gimmick. Oh, we're the Click now. And it would have led to like some type of Click type of confrontation. And, Triple H basically just saying like, no, I don't roll like that. I think Triple H probably would have hit a promo saying like, hey, I wasn't the guy who drank alcohol or did drugs. I was always the guy who was driving you guys around. I don't want no part of this. And I think it probably would have went down with that. I think it would have led to maybe it would have led to Shawn Michaels' return. I mean, who knows? It's one of those mind-boggling things where it's just like, what if Shawn Michaels were to compete at SummerSlam as a member of the NWO, and just where the hell would that story would have lead to, especially with Bischoff being the Raw general manager at that time? He would have played some role.
Yeah. I mean, I would rather have not had, like I said, that NWO storyline just needed to die. It's like Retribution. Just kill it, please. Like, just kill it. Take Behind the Barn and fucking blow its brains out.
Well, I think the difference between NWO and Retribution is NWO actually had pay-per-view matches. Let's just put it like that.
Yeah.
At least NWO had pay-per-view TV time, other than Retribution. You know, these guys get hyped up. You know, they're supposed to be this next dominant faction on the main roster, yet they're nowhere to be seen on pay-per-view. Yeah. Okay. Oh, wow. All right. Next match we have is the WWE Tag Team Championships. Hollywood Hulk Hogan and Edge taking on the Un-Americans, the team of Christian and Lance Storm. This was, obviously Christian and Edge were fictional brothers, and Hogan had just made his return to WWE this past year. Short stint with the NWO. Obviously, Vince wanted him to break out with the black and white and come back with the red and yellow, become this big baby face. Had just won the WWE Championship at Backlash, held it for a month, dropped it to The Undertaker. So obviously, the hype train only lasted, for a short amount of time. And then you place him in a tag team with Edge because, I saw you at WrestleMania 6. I was at the Sky Dome when you fought the Warrior. Oh, boy. Now you guys are in a tag team. Now you guys are tag team champions. It's one of those storylines where you meet your idols. And Edge met his idol. He tag teamed with his idol. He won championships with his idol. But it's one of those things where it's not a long stint. And at the time, Hogan was only 48 years old. So, still somewhat young, but obviously Hogan was getting up there with age. Obviously, the pinfall would go to the Un-Americans as they would be crowned new WWE Tag Team Champions, winning the match within 9 minutes and 49 seconds. Now, it was a standard WWE Tag Team match where they did the right thing by making Edge the face and Pearl leading to the Hogan hot tag for the big pop, and then Hogan was the face in this as well, obviously. And there were some nice near falls, including after the referee bump and Test showing up as well. Jericho getting involved kind of baffled me because he played no role in, being in this match despite being what, Canadian? That's the only thing I could possibly think of. And, looking back on this now, I think WWE should have given Hogan and Edge a longer reign just because fans were digging the tag team act. So they could have at least held the title for maybe like another month instead of just a few weeks, because I believe they captured the tag team championships from Billy and Chuck on SmackDown on the 4th of July episode of SmackDown. I could be mistaken.
Yep. July 4th.
But yeah, with that being said, it wasn't bad. It looked good for Hogan to get the pop. Obviously everybody was digging Hogan's run at this time because Hogan was finally back where he belonged. And him winning tag team gold, Hogan wasn't necessarily a tag team specialist unless he was like the leader of this faction. Wonder what faction that was. And yeah, pretty much Hulk Hogan was a main event guy. You never really necessarily saw Hogan as a tag team guy unless he was teaming up with somebody like Brutus Beefcake, or going by some ridiculous name like the Booty Man, or being like a long distant relative back in like the Memphis days, or some type of early 70s bullshit. But yeah, what'd you think about this match? How could it just played a little bit better? So.
Well, it's just like, it's one of those things. Of course, it's going to be a short stint. They if you remember on like Raw Roulette, they would have the strange bedfellows match where they would have. That's what this felt like. You have just two random fucking people, Hulk Hogan and Edge, which yeah, they have a history to a degree, but I just think it's cheesy. Oh, we're gonna put Edge with his fucking hero, Hulkamania, and then they have him win the titles. When I'd rather you just keep him on Billy and Chuck. It's just like I don't know. I was just glad to see it end, and it's. I also don't like when main eventers win tag belts, but that's a whole different thing. Like, it's just like Hulk Hogan as a tag team champion. Okay, it feels like a Make-A-Wish, where all Hogan's teaming up with his cancer-ridden friend. They won the tag belts. Like, it's kind of pathetic for Edge. Like, Edge, he did not. I feel like this just hurt him as opposed to, like, because nobody really remembers this. Especially back then, they're like, oh, Hogan's tag team champion. Yay, I guess. I'd rather have Edge have a singles title instead of the tag belts. He's already been tag team champion plenty of times.
Right.
So why kill momentum and just have him do this? It just feels like a damn joke. That was my rant.
Yeah, I mean, it really didn't help Edge out a lot. I mean, throughout the course of 2002, he would mainly be in like the lower mid card / tag division. As you know, a couple months later, he would be tagging with Rey Mysterio, winning another set of tag team titles for the SmackDown brand. Until he was laid off with an injury in 2003, in which we wouldn't see Edge for another year after WrestleMania 20. So he would go on to miss 2 WrestleManias, and that would be around the time where they really started to focus on Edge and blooming him into a main roster or a main event superstar. Something that I want to note here, around this point, this was a big selling point for fans in this era, only because you had to tune in to Raw and SmackDown to see who would turn up on each show. You had guys jumping ship by this point instead of being loyal to their brand. The next night on Raw is when we seen Stephanie got Brock Lesnar to go to SmackDown because obviously she had just lost Triple H, her husband. How can you lose your husband? I don't understand that. Well, they weren't married yet, obviously, but this was still kayfabe. But yeah, I mean, that was pretty much a huge move. Getting a top tier rookie like that and just saying, hey, we got Brock now, without no, acquisitions of like documents or papers. It's like, hey, I got that guy. Okay, I'm going to have him and there's nothing you can do about it. All right, fuck yourself. But then, this would lead on to other acquisitions as like Undertaker, Big Show, Guerrero and Benoit. And obviously Raw would have Triple H, Chris Jericho. They acquired the Hurricane, who was part of the SmackDown Cruiserweight division at that time. So him going to Raw kind of baffled me. Considering the fact that you couldn't really do much with him on the Raw brand despite jobbing. But, I mean, other than that, this was definitely an exciting time for WWE fans, just going through this whole transition of, what's next. So,
yeah.
But going on to the main event, which I'm not going to lie, I would actually consider this match of the night. And this is actually one of my favorite triple threat matches. Undisputed Championship match, The Undertaker, Kurt Angle, and The Rock. First of all, looking at these guys now, it's hard to believe all these guys are not, part of a main, active roster anymore. I mean, obviously, Rock has been gone for a while. I mean, we've been used to not seeing Rock as he transitioned into Hollywood. He became this big movie star. But, this was around the time where Rock would take some time off but come back. Take some time off and come back.
Yeah.
And this was an example of being pointless by having The Rock win this championship. I mean, obviously, it was to make Brock look good by defeating Rock, but don't you think it would have been a little bit better to have maybe Undertaker retain or have Kurt Angle win the championship since, they were doing that whole foreshadowing earlier within the show with that segment backstage?
I think The Rock was the right choice. Because I think it worked out perfect. You had Brock defeat The Rock, thank fuck. And then he moved on to face The Undertaker in a long-heated rivalry, and then you have him and Kurt Angle. So it kind of worked out. Like, everyone got their rivalry here with Brock Lesnar eventually. And if you're going to have anyone put Brock over, the most prestigious one is The Rock. Plus, he's on his way out again, so you got to put over the next guy.
But you know what? Now that I think about it, I mean, Kurt Angle was a heel at the time, so I don't think that would have necessarily worked out with heel versus heel, because either way, you're going to be bowling for both of them, unless you're cheering for the All-American hero. I mean, I think it would have made a little bit more sense for Undertaker, because around this time, Undertaker was still heel, but he was still getting cheered. A lot of people were cheering for him. And Undertaker was slowly transitioning back into that babyface role. For example, I mentioned the ladder match between him and Jeff Hardy, and Undertaker basically just showing his respects by raising Jeff Hardy's hand. Also, a month prior, Cena's debut match, almost getting the victory over Kurt Angle. And then you had that backstage segment where Undertaker comes in with the shade. Oh, what's your name, kid? Oh, John Cena. Takes off the shades, shakes his hand. Heels want to do that. Obviously, Undertaker was slowly transitioning back into his babyface role. But something that drives me crazy about stipulations of matches is when stipulations are not mentioned. Okay, you have a triple threat match, right? You got 3 people in the ring. Nowhere is it mentioned that there's no countouts and no disqualifications. Hey, you guys can do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, but you should already know that going in.
I mean, yeah.
They already treat their fans like shit and act like they're retarded anyway, so I'd rather them not explain it. We're not stupid. We know what a triple threat match is. So I think it insults the audience if you do tell them,
Right. But, the match ends in almost 20 minutes. This was, I believe, the longest match of this card.
Yeah, it was.
And The Rock ends up becoming undisputed champion. And at the time, he was the record-breaking WWE champion for holding the championship 7 times at this point. And the crowd went wild. This was a huge ovation. This match was amazing, especially with how exciting the last few minutes were. It's all action. Obviously they went 20 minutes at a fast pace with no rest holds, no taking breaks, which is something that I like. And, Undertaker at that time being a little bit fast and agile, that's a good thing. Because if this was Undertaker 2020, nope. We would have been saying farewell a long time ago. But, I like this. There was times in the match where it was just 2 guys and, doing all the work, and then the third guy was on the floor. But that's okay because, the formula worked well here. And when it comes to triple threat matches, you have to execute that formula to make this, a good, watchable match. And, I like this match. Like I said, this wasn't. I wouldn't necessarily would have put The Rock over. Obviously, The Rock was the more preferable choice because how else are you going to write The Rock off TV as he's going to go produce his next movie? But after that, we would see a series of Brock and Undertaker matches between Unforgiven and the No Mercy Hell in a Cell match. But
Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll definitely get there. I'm sure there are people wondering why Rock pinned Angle rather than The Undertaker for the WWE Championship. I mean, that would have made a lot more sense, but at the same time, I guess Undertaker could go out there and say, I never lost the title. And, I think it makes sense because Rock dropped the WWE Championship to Brock Lesnar, 1 month later, and then Lesnar's first feud is on SmackDown with The Undertaker as a babyface.
Yeah. So that's
not,
why they didn't have him pinned, because they probably had that feud set up already.
By not having Undertaker get pinned, though, I mean, it made sense. I guess it made sense for him to go after the WWE title. But yeah, I love this. I mean, JR screaming off the top of his lungs. He's hyping up Rock, first ever, 7-time WWE champion in history. And, obviously they showed some highlights and Rock continued his posing, for the WWE title. And this was pretty much the last good run for The Rock. I mean, obviously he came back in 2003, but that was just a shit show itself. Him betraying this Hollywood character. He had, the third and final standoff between Rock and Austin. And then he would go up against another bald-headed bastard in Goldberg. But we're not going to get to that because that's a different year. We're not going to get to that. But all right, show rating time or grade time, I would say. I did like this pay-per-view. Obviously, we're getting into the better half of 2002, and this was a good start. So I would give this a B, a solid B.
Yeah, that's what I was going to give it. I thought you were going to go higher than me.
No, I'll between a B minus and a B, I'll definitely give this a B. It was a pretty good show overall. Thanks to the greatness of the main event, because that's the only match I was looking forward to. I didn't mind the other matches. You had a good opening match for the tables match between Guerrero and Benoit and the Dudleys. I wish they would have showed or demonstrated more dominance when it comes to Brock Lesnar's reign and basically on the road to him becoming WWE champion at SummerSlam. If they didn't put the Intercontinental Championship on the line, that definitely would have been a lot better. Honestly, the main focal points of this show were not only the main event, but where the hell is Triple H going to end up? And obviously, we knew where that was going. And obviously, that would lead to a big feud between two former best friends, D-Generation X, members going head to head, killing each other at SummerSlam, which that will be the next pay-per-view for this retro review for the year 2002. When you mention Vengeance 2002 to wrestling fans, there are, how would I say this? They're going to bring up Rock, Angle, and Undertaker because if they've seen it, they know that it was an amazing match. And if you haven't seen it, hopefully you guys can review it on your channel. There might be some people that only think that this was as a one-match show because obviously the other matches were practically under 10 minutes, which is fair, but there are only, a few other fun matches on here, like, Lesnar and RVD, the tag team tables match, the tag team championship match, I did not mind, but, as DVD Freak explained before, it's kind of like, you meeting your idols and not what you expected it to turn out to be. But another fun thing about this pay-per-view was the debut pay-per-view of John Cena. Obviously, he was still developing. He was still blossoming into his character. We want to see the rap character for another couple months. But, you saw a high, um, you know, a range of like moves and arsenals, which Cena doesn't really do anymore. Because nowadays, if you see Cena perform, he has the 5 moves of doom, including, a 6 move, which is very rare. Very rare. I mean, once in a while, he'll do like the springboard stunner, which, haven't really seen that since he pulled it off at WrestleMania 31 against Rusev. Um, whatever the fuck that move was at Showdown or the Super Showdown in Australia, I'm not sure.
The Kung Fu Jackie Chan shit.
Oh my god, that was stupid, And then you got his hair all combed up, and he didn't even take a single bump in that match, so that was pretty much pointless of bringing him back.
Yeah. Well, you gotta get that blood money, man.
But yeah, you know what? This was overall a great pay-per-view. And I believe this was a great start to the Ruthless Aggression era. Because I wouldn't necessarily say that the King of the Ring started it, because King of the Ring ended. That was the last King of the Ring pay-per-view we would ever see live on pay-per-view. And, WWE went out their way and said, all right, let's move forward. We got all these new, fresh talents, let's expose them on to television. Let's, get them familiar with the fans. And pretty much the rest is history. I mean, later within the year, we would see, guys start to really blossom. Cena, Batista, who was still part of the main roster. I think he was still with Devon at this time, but I know he would get traded over to the Raw brand as well, and he would get more exposure once they repackaged him a little bit. Because I believe he debuted or re-debuted on Raw late 2002, squishing Just Incredible. And then we would see the birth of Evolution with Triple H, Flair, Batista, and then later on Randy Orton. But your thoughts, overall thoughts on this pay-per-view?
To me, this is a 2-match show. I really enjoyed 3. I liked the Cruiserweight title match. I liked the opener. And then, of course, you have your main event, which I think you liked it a little bit more than I did. I think it's a good triple threat match, but we would see much better ones in the future. And, a lot of it, I don't like promos during pay-per-views, especially if it's a giant, 23-minute promo segment. I want wrestling on a pay-per-view, so that's 20 minutes that you could have given to someone else. Like Regal and Hardy, I think that deserved to go longer. Booker Tits and Big Show, they can fuck off. Their matches, they can stay where they're at. But, it's just, why waste that time when you could have done it on Raw? Stuff like that pisses me off. It takes away from the talent. Then you get to sit there in the ring for 20 minutes and just what feels like a Raw segment. So,
pretty much.
Overall, this is kind of like a middle-of-the-line pay-per-view, maybe a little bit above. But, eventually, very soon, we get into probably my favorite because my favorite pay-per-view is WrestleMania 19, but favorite non-WrestleMania pay-per-view of all time for WWE at least is SummerSlam 2002. And I would go as far as saying it's the best pay-per-view they ever put on.
Yeah, it's up there for me. I mean, I got my top 5, but SummerSlam's up there. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put that in my top category. Obviously there was moments, you had the epic return of Shawn Michaels making his in-ring return after 4 years out. Brock Lesnar defeating Rock for the WWE Championship, and countless other matches. But like you said, you just gotta stay tuned. I mean, we're just getting to the good stuff. Things are about to get a lot better. I mean, we're off to a good start here with Vengeance, but once we get to SummerSlam, once we get to No Mercy, once we get to Survivor Series, which was probably my favorite pay-per-view of this year. Then we're going to be talking. We're definitely going to be talking. But social media-wise, we're about to sign off here. So thank you guys for tuning in for another exciting episode of the Pro Wrestle Zone podcast. If you guys are looking to find me or the DVD Freak, where can we find you?
Type in the DVD Freak. If it comes up, add me. Just anywhere. Just try anywhere at this point.
And of course, you guys can find me on all forms of social media, but you can especially find me on YouTube at The End of Beast 94. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, especially if you're going to be watching my videos and you're not subscribed. What are you doing? Hit that button. And of course, subscribe to the Pro Wrestle Zone podcast. And until next time, you guys have a great night.